I believe that this nation should commit itself to achieving the goal, before this decade is out, of landing a man on the moon and returning him safely to the Earth. No single space project in this period will be more impressive to mankind or more important for the long-range exploration of space, and none will be so difficult or expensive to accomplish.
It's one small step for man, one giant leap for mankind.
Identifying gender discrimination can be a difficult thing in today's world, simply because society's notion of what it is to be female or male is so deeply ingrained in our psyche. From birth, most women are shown that there are certain ways of behaving which define us as female. These messages are given to us on a basic level through our clothes, toys, and through our nursery rhymes and games, and on a more sophisticated level through observing our parents, the media, and in some instances through our religious influences. Eventually we begin to link this with what is socially expected of us later in life. Because of these messages, many women believe that their role is to be emotional and domestic, whereas men are similarly programmed to be unemotional and the hunter-gatherers of the family. However, in this day and age, it's becoming clear that these programmed roles, technically named heteronormative roles, can be unrealistic. For instance, many mothers now work full-time, and many men are behaving in a more traditionally female way. In the same way, many people's attitudes towards disabled people are influenced by the culture in which they belong, with culture playing a major role in shaping society's beliefs, expectations about, and behaviour towards disabled people and women. With the progress society has made in accepting those who deviate from the programmed norm, it has become essential for society to reprogram itself. So with this societal shift taking place, are women still in such a difficult position? In order to identify this, we must first look to women's journey in the past. Historians throughout time have universally struggled to illuminate the present and the future by shedding light on the past. And although history is supposed to be objective, women's contribution to historical events is more than often overlooked. From the biblical birth of man and woman in the Garden of Eden, with woman being created with one of man's ribs, the idea that women are inferior to men has been reinforced in society. This, along with the fortified idea that women's role is to provide children, take care of the home, and cater to the needs of men, have meant that it has been near impossible until recent times to deviate from this norm. Deviation from the norm has proven to be dangerous in the past, and at certain points, any out-of-the-ordinary behaviour was treated as witchcraft, lunacy, or promiscuity. The social expectations and limitations of women continued throughout the Victorian era, and like Jane Austen before them, authors such as Charlotte Bronte and Mary Ann Evans, aka George Eliot, depicted the restrictions and limitations of being a woman in Victorian society. Surprisingly, Queen Victoria, a very strong, powerful woman herself, was at the forefront of banishing women's rights, famously quoting that were women to unsex themselves by claiming equality with men, they would become hateful, heathen, and disgusting beings. Women in the early 1900s fought for the right to vote. Their lack of ability to do so illustrated how women were viewed by society, and eventually, when they were successful in 1920, this legislative change was a fundamental part of women's fight for equality. Feminists refer to this as the first wave of feminism. During World War II, when men were no longer present to do their jobs, women were allowed the freedom to work without criticism. The famous posters of Rosie the Riveter cried out, "Women, we can't win without them." But the poster which states, "The more women at work, the sooner we win," suggests the true nature of the situation, hinting that this role is only temporary for women. It doesn't for 1 minute threaten the basic idea of a woman's real function. In the 1950s, after these working women had served their purpose, they were expected to revert back to the role of domestic goddess, with the media reinforcing this role with wave upon wave of household commercial advertising. but the role of a 1950s woman was repressive and constrictive. The public's need for home stability after the war was reflected in its expectations of women, and the media reinforced the idea that a woman's place was in the home. In the 60s and 70s, with the popularity of the various feminist women's movements, women began to realise that their role had to be rewritten into the history books. This era of social change, demonstration and protest. In the 60s and 70s, with the popularity of the various feminist women's movements, women began to realise that their role had to be rewritten into the history books. This era of social change, demonstration and protest was important because feminists now focused on gaining social and economic equality, as well as being equal to men in the eyes of the law. In the advent of the 1980s, with its powerful business and money-related ethos, women were thriving in business, though for the most part many couldn't seem to do this without sacrificing their femininity. The 80s also saw the first female Prime Minister, Margaret Thatcher, though an inspiration for feminists she was not. In her 11 years in office, Britain's first woman failed to put another woman into her cabinet of 20 or so men. She famously said, "I owe nothing to women's lib." So where are we now? Women have certainly come a long way, though our journey is a long way from over. With the media placing increased pressure on youth to seek out the perfect image and appearance, women in the public eye are becoming a product of their own need to be beautiful, and the current emaciation of certain celebrities and the arrival of the size zero model illustrates this. The world's major religious organisations have always been run by men, simply because we live in a patriarchal society, and it is worth analysing most religions, small or otherwise, in terms of their approach to women's issues and in their treatment of women. The oppression of women hasn't always been prevalent in society. In the ancient Egyptian society, women were equal to men in status and prestige. However, as time passed and countries began to flourish, there was a shift in the socio-economic status of women. Women began to reduce in standing. The story of Adam and Eve is regarded as a negative influence on society's perception of woman. This story, and Eve's subsequent fall from grace, is one that is similar in Islam, Judaism and Christianity. Eve was created to be a companion for Adam, from his body, immediately implying subservience. Islam goes in one direction, blaming both Adam and Eve for their fall from grace, but Christianity and Judaism blame Eve completely for eating the forbidden fruit, seducing Adam into eating it too, and therefore corrupting him and all humanity. Could this be why there has been so much abuse and disregard for women in the past? Or why women have never received full equality? Or is this a reflection on the already negative views of women by the society and men which created this story? Only recently have there been minor breakthroughs in the equality of women in religion. Women have been admitted into the leadership of many religious groups. Significantly, the Church of England, admission of female vicars in 1991. In other religions, women's access to clergy and other leadership roles is still being opposed. The Catholic Church's recent standing on the issue of abortion has put them in the limelight in terms of attitudes towards women, and the right to choose and the right to life has been a hot topic for centuries. 40 years on from the original Abortion Act in 1967, it seems that there are still plenty of people who want to return to the time when women have no right to choose, unfortunately forcing many to resort to the horrors of backstreet abortion. We live in a multi-phase society in which boundless opinions are exposed to one another all the time, and where compromise is essential for us to get along. So how can women succeed when their society, strongly dominated by religion, tradition and customs, is managed by a male dictatorial environment?
Stereotyping summarizes the decision to attribute a complete identity to someone on the basis of their possession of one characteristic alone, according to Pip Jones 2003. The main stereotypes associated